Notice you've got three very lovely children here. I'll let each of them introduce themselves. What's your name?
Betsy.
Betsy? How old are you? Once a month, the woman who lives in this house on North Colonial Drive in Montgomery makes a quiet and uneventful drive to the post office. There she deposits a letter, watches it drop out of sight, its destination still unknown, but somewhere about halfway around the world. The letter begins with the greeting, "Dear Ed," but whether Ed or somebody else, or for that matter anybody, will read it at all is unknown. B.J. Capelli and her husband Ed have been married for 11 years, but she doesn't know, and hasn't known for some time now, whether he is alive or dead. For Air Force Major Ed Capelli is one of the more than 1,000 American servicemen now listed as missing in action. Well, Mrs. Capelli, how did you first learn that your husband was missing?
Well, the normal procedure, of course, is for a personal affairs office to contact you. However, they had reached my husband's parents in Rhode Island before they did me, unfortunately, and my brother-in-law called and told me about it. And then, of course, I was notified by the Air Force in about an hour.
What was your initial reaction?
Shock. You know that these things can happen, but I guess you really don't believe it really happened to you.
Was the day that you got this word the worst, or have there been times since then which you'd actually consider worse days?
Well, I suppose there was a short period after that I kept hoping perhaps he would be found somewhere and picked up. And once I faced that, it was much easier, but it was about 2 weeks.
One of the things that I've noticed about not only yourself, but all of the wives that find themselves in similar situations, is that you all seem to have this deep inner strength that sort of keeps you going when a lot of people think they wouldn't be able to. What do you attribute this to?
Well, I think it's our faith in God. We know that we have to go on, and with His help we can.
Your husband has been missing now nearly 4 years, I believe. He was shot down in '66?
No, November 17th, 1967.
67.
So it's coming up on 3 years.
3 years now. What is your biggest hope and your biggest fear, both at this time?
Well, of course, my biggest hope is that I'll have some communication from him or a statement from either the government saying that my husband is a prisoner of war. The fears we face every day of not knowing, really, if he's dead or alive. You don't know how to plan your lives, so you're hanging in limbo, so to speak.
How have the children taken all this?
I think they've taken it very well. I've tried to tell them the truth and explain the situation as best I can, and I think they do very well, considering.
The Capellis still have one thing that no family of a man missing in action can give up. They have hope. Hope that perhaps one day a letter will arrive, perhaps one day word will come from the North Vietnamese or some other source, or the day that everyone hopes for, the day when the husband and father of the Capelli family comes home to resume his proper role as head of the household. This is Bill Whipple, WSFA TV News, reporting. Thus far, the Paris peace talks have accomplished little more than reaching an agreement by delegates on what size and shape the table they'll sit around will be. But the North Vietnamese delegation in Paris has been the recipient of numerous American visitors, mostly wives of men held prisoner or reported missing in action over North Vietnam. One of the wives who recently returned from Paris and a meeting with a representative of Hanoi is Mrs. Wanda Ruffin of Montgomery, the wife of a Navy lieutenant missing in action since 1966. Do you feel that this trip to Paris accomplished anything? Did it do anything for you personally, or do you feel for the overall cause?
Well, yes, to both questions. For me personally, I was not satisfied until I had made such a trip, because I just feel like I've got to do everything within my power to try to find out about my husband's status. So far as the overall cause is concerned, this was the first time this summer, I believe, that two women have been in to talk with the delegation. They have been constantly refused admittance. So the fact that we were able to talk to a delegate is a sign to be optimistic about, and that maybe the next wives that go will receive admittance also. My biggest hope, of course, is that we will find out that my husband is alive and well. Now, my biggest fear would be that we will never find out whether he is alive or not. One way or the other, I think we must know, especially where my daughter is concerned, because she's a 4-year-old who has a question every hour. And most of these questions have to do with her daddy, and she wants to know where he is and why he can't come home.
What do you tell her?
Well, I think she is now satisfied with the answer that he is either in Vietnam or that he is in heaven. She was in great hopes that when I came back from Paris that I would be able to tell her where he was. And I have heard her discussing this with the neighborhood children, and she says that the people over there just wouldn't tell her mommy where her daddy is.
So Mrs. Ruffin is home now, and she's back at work at the Central Alabama Rehabilitation Center, where she's a speech and hearing pathologist. She says it keeps her busy, and when she's busy, her mind doesn't spend all its time worrying about her husband. But no amount of work can erase those thoughts, or perhaps I should say worries, from the mind of the 27-year-old wife of a missing flyer. This is Bill Whipple, WSFA TV News, reporting. Mrs. Ruffin, you've just returned from Paris, where you had a rather unusual... During the past 2 evenings, we have broadcast interviews with families of men missing in action or reported prisoners of war in Southeast Asia. Tonight, we take a look at the efforts being made by these families to dramatize the plight of their missing men and what you, as citizens of Montgomery, can do to help them.
We're trying to arouse enough world attention about the plight of the families and the prisoners of war and the men missing in action, that through world opinion, that we feel that we can pressure North Vietnam into releasing a official list that they will treat our men humanely and possibly release the sick and wounded. And people keep asking us, we ask, write a letter. This will only take a few minutes of your time. And if you just do that for us once a month, and then they'll come back and they'll say, do you really think that my letter, has done any good? So I'd like to say that, yes, there's many ways that we have proof that public opinion, that North Vietnam is sensitive to this. Like in 1968, there were only 3 letters received from prisoners of war. And then in 1969, there was only 96 letters. Well, this last year, since the wives have been speaking out, and the people like Ross Perot have tried to help us in our campaign, there's been 207 letters received from prisoners. And that was like the recent film release that was on the TV networks. We found out some new guys, so if we just find out one man, out of all those hundreds every month or so, then we feel that our efforts aren't in vain.
The interviews and reports that you have been seeing during the past few days on this station have shown just a few of the families who are currently caught up in the terrible human tragedy accompanying the present war in Southeast Asia. They're typical of more than 3,000 dependents located throughout the country, all waiting for that unknown date when their prisoners of war and men missing in action can come home. When that date will be, nobody knows for sure. But meanwhile, these women, children, and parents ask your support, and more importantly, your understanding. In reality, they're asking very little. Only a chance to improve their opportunity to once again become a normal American family. This is Bill Whipple, WSFA TV News, reporting.
Going back to the May events, in our particular case, there was some great misunderstanding about the role of the faculty, and the facts of the case simply did not bear out some of the allegations. I think too is what we're catching is a great feeling, a general feeling on the part of the public that the faculty, to say it kindly, has more to contribute than they are contributing, or that in some cases they, in society's view, are not responding appropriately. My sense of our own faculty is, in talking with them, they really desperately would like to help. They come to me and say, you know, tell me what to do. I'd like to do it. I'd like to be helpful. I'd like to be involved.
Mr. Baxley, what type of a campaign do you plan to wage, or are you just going to sit back and depend on what happened last time?
No, we're going to be active and out, but I'm not going to get drawn into something. They're going to run a campaign that's just full of lies and untruths and distortions and try to smear me and smear me personally, and they hope that I'll get drawn into answering some of these ridiculous, absurd charges, and it'll take the light off of his action in office and what he's failed to do and what I propose to do in office. And so I'm not going to get involved in answering some of these distortions that are going to come out and some of these smears. I'm just going to run a smooth type campaign and still point out not only where he's failed to do his job in office, but what I plan to do after I get in there, and not get drawn into a controversy of trying to defend some obvious lie that everybody that knows is ridiculous and untrue on its face.
Have you had any conversation or conferences with George Wallace or Jerry Beasley since your primary victory?
Yes, we've had several conferences, and I want to work with them to any way that I can to see that we all have a good administration and that we all work for the best interest of all the people of Alabama.
Your husband was a pilot and knew that something like this might possibly happen in a combat situation. Is this something that you had ever discussed previous to him going to Vietnam?
Well, yes, we did. We talked about these things a number of times, and of course, to put your personal affairs in order. But as I said, it always happens to someone else and not you. But I think we were prepared to a certain extent. We know that these things can happen.
There's the publicity that comes out of various sources relating to the treatment of the known prisoners, and probably similar treatment to those who have not yet been identified. How does this affect you?
Well, this is a great cause for worry. I would think that they would treat those whom they have identified with much better care than they would those whom they have not identified. This is, I guess, one of the biggest problems is that they are not responsible for those whom they have not identified, because if they treat them so poorly that they do not survive, then they may just say, well, we never had them.
Is this also a fear that the war could come to an end, and if they haven't been identified, they might never be?
That is also a fear.
Your husband is one of the men who has been identified as a known prisoner. At least you're aware that he is alive. What are your worst thoughts, and what are some of the better thoughts that you have of the situation?
Well, I guess my best thought is that I know that we're very fortunate, because we do know that Mike is alive. At least we did in May. there are so many of the wives that don't know. There's almost 1,600 men now, and there are only 400 that are known prisoners of war. So I feel very fortunate, this whole family does. And all my good thoughts are, about the day that he'll come back home and get to see his little girl that he's never seen, and the things that we'll do together. And then you worry about, you take almost 4 years out of a man's life, and it's probably going to be longer. I'm not a pessimist. I've been an optimist all the time. I've never felt that Mike was dead, but naturally you have times that you do worry. You worry that how long will it take him to adjust when they come home? I feel that my husband is very strong mentally, and that if anyone, that Mike will come out of this real...
Fine job. Once again, we'd like to remind you, those of you listening on your radio, call one of your neighbors right now. Get them to turn the radio on, because the governor has arrived at the Shelby County Courthouse, and he'll be speaking to 2-year one in Tuscaloosa at a matter with the bank interest money that a certain number will have to... We're also going to...
Well, they're not supporting George Wallace, I'll say that. I won't call anybody's name.
You've also said some of the money interests, such as the banks and utilities, are backing other candidates.
Yes, sir. The big banks in Alabama, most of them are against me.
Who do you think they're backing?
Let me say this. They're against George Wallace because my wife got bank interest money from them, and the utilities are against me. That is the leadership, not the working man, because we're going to pull the string on them on these high utility rates that cost every businessman and farmer and house owner more than they can barely pay.
What's your reaction to the reports that you're running kind of a scared campaign behind Brewer?
I'm not running I don't know what I'm running a campaign knowing that that the message that comes from Alabama means that we will never surrender, that we are going to go on and on and on and on. And of course the newspapers are reporting the campaign in such fashion that you can't tell what's going on.
They're called the dollar bills, ladies and gentlemen, the $3 bills.
John, I haven't told you that.
Okay, sing us another song. I'm talking about Johnny Kane. Johnny? It's nice to be here in Shelby County. We'd like to invite all you folks.
Just to think of all the bad things that I'd hear. As a kid, I strayed reckless and carefree. Just the opposite of what Mama would say.
If I'm elected your governor, I will reorganize our state government, starting with the areas where we've had the most trouble. Our state docks, state highway department, our state educational system, and the state prison board. And when I'm elected, all state books will be open to the state auditor for the purpose to hand to the taxpayer a balance sheet of state business. A government free of corruption. I don't think the governor would mind state books being open for examination. I will stand firm for the working people. I will do this by supporting organized labor. Our working people need some representation. The only way they can get this representation is by bringing themselves together in one body. I'll cut it short on kind of not having many people here. Thank you very much. A $100 million state debt, the greatest tax imposition ever known to the history of our state. I've been informed by the Alabama Education Association by a questionnaire that our school fund had been drained.
$100 in this campaign. You can name them right here today. And it's been put in for reasons of patriotism and concern for these children. And today, the policeman, when I say the policeman, I mean the local policeman, the sheriff, and the trooper, and the deputy, has at his back a federal judge with a maze of so-called civil rights laws that can send him to the penitentiary, that can break him financially, that can cause ruin of not only his career but of his family. He's been left to stand practically alone because a politician is afraid to back him up. That's why in my platform for governor, I say that I will personally, as chief law enforcement officer, go the bond of any local law enforcement officer, supply state attorneys, he'll not have to hire lawyers, who will defend him in any court of law, and we will see to it his family does not face financial ruin. That's called backing up, not motor mouthing. I'm not going into the Liberty Amendment today. I don't want to go into $12.5 billion worth of goods, trade credits, and outright grants of our tax money to the communist bloc nations in the Balkans and Russia, who in turn are sending $9 billion to North Vietnam. We hope to see this program expanded and continued to the extent that every child in this state, regardless of whose family they come from and regardless of what income their families earn, will have an equal opportunity to educational advantages in this state. But there are not enough jobs to go around for the great mass of youth in our state who had wished to obtain a higher institution education. And so we decided that we would be the only state in the Union that would have a program that would provide bus service. I know when you're talking about busing, you've got to be very careful about what kind of busing you're talking about, but I'm talking about voluntary busing, where you get on the bus because you want to, not because HEW put you on the bus and send you someplace. The public school program is the most important program. There is an effort, of course,